Wake up, let's talk sports. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Leadoff. Heard here every Saturday morning. I'm Ashton, this is Tony, and we are going to get you ready for your sports weekend, including March Madness, the Elite Eight. And the Elite Eight, I think we all picked, right?
What about March Madness has been the maddest March I think I have ever seen.
The Elite Eight, for the first time since the NCAA started seeding teams in the tournament, there's no number one seed left.
Yep.
Not in the Final Four, in the Elite Eight.
Elite Eight, yeah. San Diego State knocked off Alabama. Miami knocked off Houston. Man, the only team I have left, or had left until Gonzaga, I had UCLA, and Gonzaga knocked out UCLA. My Final Four already is trash.
I had Gonzaga making it to the Elite Eight and Texas making it to the Elite Eight. That's it. My Final Four is out. Championship done. So hook 'em horns. I'm just going for Texas now. Duke's out of there. My championship team's out of there. I have no hope anymore.
So who's the powerhouse left here that we see?
It looks like Texas
is the top team, I think.
After cruising Xavier yesterday, I think Kansas State has a good shot to win it. I think they've surprised a lot of people. They have Florida Atlantic, who's been good, but I think they have the easiest path. Hot. I mean, look, to make it to the championship game, Kansas needs to beat Florida Atlantic, and then they play San Diego State or Creighton, which, again, have been good teams.
Yeah.
But very few people picked, I'm going to say nobody, very few people picked a 5-seed San Diego State, a 6-seed in Creighton, and a 9th seed Florida Atlantic. So
I would say by far Texas is going to have the toughest route to get there.
Yeah, Miami's been playing really well.
Yeah.
If you follow the women's bracket too,
their women's team
is playing really well. Also, and this UConn Gonzaga might be the best matchup
we've
left.
Seen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe
even than we've seen the two teams that had really get out and are going to grind and compete hard.
And we talk about the blue bloods, the college basketball royalty, which there are none left. But UConn Gonzaga, at least UConn has that pedigree.
Mm-hmm.
And Gonzaga for the last however long,
since
10
they were
years,
a Cinderella team, then they've just become a team.
Yeah, so right now that's your powerhouse matchup, UConn Gonzaga. Texas, the highest ranked seed left. I mean, listen to this again. 5 seed, 6 seed, 9 seed, 3 seed, 5 seed, 2 seed, 4 seed, 3 seed. I don't know if anybody does the math and adds up all the seeds and said in the Elite Eight, this is the highest number of seeds.
Yeah.
I bet that would probably be true.
Yeah.
So let's re-bracket this. Let's cheat a little bit. Who's your Final Four now?
If I'm picking from this, I'm going to say Texas over Miami. I think I'm going to have to go San Diego State over Creighton. Probably Kansas State and, the Zags. It's really tough at this point.
Yeah, I found out this week, I think I talked about last week, Drew Timmy's only 22, and he has another year of eligibility. I guess we'll see what his draft stock is like. He might come back to Gonzaga. It seems like he's been there forever. I have Creighton over San Diego State only because I think San Diego State might have a hangover after playing the number 1 seed Alabama, overall number 1 seed, beating them, and then going to, no offense to Creighton. It's a Big East school. It's a good basketball school.
Yeah.
Kansas State over Florida Atlantic. Texas over Miami in a close one. And I'm going to pick UConn over Gonzaga. And I'll tell you why in a minute. Because I'm going to take UConn over Texas in an upset there. And Creighton over San Diego State, setting up a Big East matchup in the championship game. Just like the old days.
See, I think we could see a Big 12 matchup.
Kansas State and
Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, how wild would that be? You couldn't have called that.
Maybe Kansas, Texas.
Yeah, but not Kansas State.
Yeah, not Kansas State. And I bet you there are some Kansas on the right. the correct side of the bracket to make that happen, right?
No, they were on Texas's side.
Ew. Okay,
Yeah,
never mind.
so
I was thinking they were like with
they
Duke.
couldn't have made that matchup.
Man, I was hoping for the
It's-
Texas Houston matchup because you have Houston going to the Big 12 next year.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that was one I didn't. I had Houston going all the way.
that's what I mean. You can look at mine. I had Houston, Alabama, and they
Yeah.
both Houston, Alabama lose simultaneously
Hmm.
or back to back
Both to a 5 seed team.
in big upsets.
Yeah.
I mean, not ridiculous upsets.
No,
I mean,
they handled them. In
I
both
don't
games
think-
they were handled.
I don't think San Diego State was anybody really predicted them, but I thought Miami had the momentum. They're ranked too high or seeded too high to really be a Cinderella team.
Yeah.
But they pull off the upset against Indiana, and I just like how they were playing.
Just to recap the whole bracket, all the upsets. I mean, we saw upsets every day throughout the tournament.
My bracket was trashed, and usually I
From
do
day one, from
I
damn
do
near
pretty
game
good,
one.
yeah.
Mine
I've
was
never.
blown.
I don't think I've ever not had a Final Four team. Really, I do pretty good in Final Fours. I think I'm usually 2 or 3 out of 4, and usually my championship team is still intact. Outside of one year when I picked Michigan State to win it all, and they lost in the first round. But I don't think I've ever gone and not gotten a Final Four team
Like I said,
in the Elite 8 round.
even with I had picked Houston, I still kind of had UCLA as my dark horse. I mean, I know they're ranked number 2. I kind of had them coming in, and if anyone was gonna have a shot at knocking off some top seeds, I thought UCLA would be the one. I thought they could be the one to maybe make it all the way.
Yeah.
And man, they couldn't pull it off either.
I thought Princeton was going to pull the upset too. It was a close game at halftime, and then Creighton pulled away. I think they were up close to 20, and then Princeton had come back late. But Creighton was able to hold them off. I was once Houston, Alabama were out of it, I was kind of rooting for Princeton to keep going. What's the biggest seed we have? Florida Atlantic is still in there.
Yeah.
They've played well, and they're ranked pretty high to be. I mean, I guess a 9 seed making the Final Four would be Cinderella-like, and of course Florida Atlantic, not a traditional basketball school, not in the sense that, I mean, not that they're a football school or anyway, but not in the sense that they've made it this far before. This is their first Elite 8, and Creighton's first Elite 8. Like I said, they're a Big East basketball team. That surprises me that they've never made it this far before.
Yeah.
Texas is their first Elite 8 in 15 years. And then UConn, Gonzaga. I mean,
And
they've
even
been
with
here
the
before.
off the court issues that Texas has had, for them to be able to rebound like this.
Hire the man already. I'm sure that their interim head coach, he still has that attached to his name. I'm sure he's hired. Maybe they don't want any more distractions this year, any more news stories.
Just let him play
Hopefully
out.
they've told him, hey, you're our coach, don't worry. I know there's a lot of criticism going on in the press about take that interim off. Of course, it's just a name. No. Is there any way he's not the coach next year?
He's the coach now. He will be the coach next year. Yeah. There's no way you don't bring him back. You don't pay the guy.
I mean, it's a very talented
It's not going to
team.
come down to numbers. Texas has the money. They have to pay the guy.
Yes. Amber Alert. He's definitely going to be the coach next year, and he's not this big powerhouse coach where he's going to be paid. He's going to need to be paid like that. There's not going to be any negotiating, I don't think, because Texas is a talented team.
Yeah.
No offense to him, but he was able to keep this team together. Players that didn't know about the Chris Beard suspension and eventual firing until going into the game, whatever day that was, whatever the game was, they went into the locker room not knowing.
Yeah.
Outside of a few tall leadership players. So he's able, and they did struggle a little bit right after, but he was able to pull them together. And man, what a rough team a rough situation Chris Beard's in now. Deservingly so, but he had this team where
he could be. He was sitting on a throne here.
Yeah. And now where did he go? Ole Miss, Mississippi State, something? I think it was Ole Miss.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean this Texas team is is something else. I really didn't call this early in the season. I didn't know if they were this type of team that could endure the pain and struggles it takes to make it through this tournament. I mean, this is, the past week has been nothing but amazing for this team. I mean, these kids, just to turn around back to back to back to back and play these in this tournament is something else anyways. You don't even have time to prepare for your next opponent. You're just on the court playing.
Yeah.
And for that team, I think Texas surprised me in that way, that they could be that team.
They're a veteran team, a pretty old team in terms of college years, winning back-to-back Big 12 championships. And now finally pulling through, making the Elite Eight for the first time in a while. I know a lot of years in past years, they've come into the tournament with not championship hopes, but I mean, high hopes they should make Sweet 16 or even further.
Yeah.
And have lost in the first round. So it's a good turning point for the program.
Yeah.
And so I had, I don't think I picked a winner. I guess I have UConn. I just like the favorable matchup. I don't know that it'll turn out this one, but I like UConn over Creighton in the championship.
As much as it pains me, I think I'm going to have to take Texas, taking this one all the way.
I think they have to, I mean, just terms of talent, I think you have to take Texas. If that's what you're going off of. Depending on momentum, I would take Miami or Kansas State. On pedigree, UConn. On you're just talking about the players and their experience. I think Gonzaga probably has the most experience.
Yeah.
Of anybody on this left in this.
I think at this point you can flip a coin and you're going to be as close as guessing.
And
that's about as good as you can get in this tournament.
If we didn't know who's going to win it with all the powerhouses that came into this tournament, we don't know who's going to win now.
No.
Just by saying, hey, they're the most talented team. That's not saying anything, because probably Texas, I think, probably should have been a number 1 seed after winning the Big 12, but definitely the top 5, 6 most talented teams aren't left anymore.
No, you're right.
Speaking of NCAA and college sports, we're going to take a different turn here. In college swimming, there was, the controversy with transgendered athlete. We're not really going to get into that story, but sort of kind of on that level, the world athletics has banned transgendered women from competing in elite female competitions. I think they're talking more of track and field, but I think it's kind of overall blanket, whatever sports world athletics.
World swimming as well has, that world swimming falls under that.
And I don't know that the NCAA falls under this. I don't know how broad world athletics covers. I think it's more like Olympic events, qualifiers for Olympics, things like that.
Yeah, it would be the FINA sanction type events. To be controversial and not controversial.
Not political. We're not going to talk politics at all.
Why can we not have... We have men's, we have women's. Why can we not just have a transgender category? And they compete, all transgender that want to fall in this category, they compete in this category.
There have been talks of that. I think at the NCAA level, when all the the swimming controversy blew up, I don't know the logistics of that. If there's enough athletes to compete, I was about to compare it with certain other aspects of Olympics and things like that, but I'm not gonna take two completely different denominations of people and compare them at all. I'm not going to go to that level, take it out of context. But without sounding political whatsoever, that may be the solution. I don't know. I haven't studied this, and even World Athletics said that they're going to look into this. They're going to put a task force together to study transgender inclusion. And that would be chaired by a transgender athlete, which I think is instead of just being political like a lot of people and saying, hey, this is the way it should be because of this. Everybody has an opinion. Most people are wrong. Not for this particular, just in general, we're all wrong about something. But they went the extra step, say, this is what we're doing. We don't know a lot about the situation, or we don't know a lot about transgender athletes in general. So we're going to take the step to study, to understand the transgendered athlete, figure out, I'm not going to say something that they didn't say, but I think they've gone the extra mile to go to cover themselves to think, hey, if we're doing the wrong thing, maybe we'll understand about it later. But personally, not being political, just from a competition point of view, I think this is the right decision.
Absolutely.
I'm not a scientist. I don't know about, because they mention in here anybody who's gone through male puberty. I'm not going to tell you I know about individuals taking any sort of hormones, anybody who's in transition, not in transition, what most of, the terminology is. I'm not going to pretend I know any of that, but basically they're doing this to protect the female athlete.
Well, from not only a scientific standpoint, just from my own eyes, there's a huge difference between a female athlete and a male athlete.
Yes.
Sorry, that's it. There's bottom line, males would have a more competitive edge versus most females. That's not across the board. There's plenty of females
at that level.
There's plenty of females that can go out and compete against guys all day long, and if they want to go compete at the guy in a male sport on a male team, by all means, go do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely go do it, and I promise you can compete at that level. But for a male to go play on a female team in most circumstances there's going to be such a huge competitive edge for that male that it would not be fair. So for a male to say that they are, and maybe they are transitioning and they're transgender, they have such a competitive edge against the females that it just doesn't make it fair for any female that's worked that hard to get to that level.
Yeah.
Imagine if LeBron James decided that he was a female, he was transgender, and he was going to go play in the WNBA.
And for whatever reason, political or not, they allowed it. Like I said, at that level, I think he dominates the NBA. He dominates the WNBA. You take not even a role player in the NBA. I'm not going to say that he would dominate or not in the WNBA, but at that level, the differences in strength, in size come into play. I could go train all day long, playing basketball, running track, swimming. You could probably take an average female athlete. They may be able to beat me at that. I don't know. I'm sure they could. But once you get into college, once you get into professional realms,
in basketball, if you took a G League player and they said, "Oh yeah, I'm transgender. I want to play in the WNBA," and they allow it, they have a pretty good shot to take a female player's spot, because there's only so many roster spots at that point. They would lose the roster spot to a true female athlete on that team, and they would probably come in and be very dominant. Not that they would be the best, but they would be a very dominant player. And I just think of this in, again, trying not to get too controversial.
Yeah.
It's just not fair to the female athlete.
And that's the point they go in quotes. They're saying this decision was based on the overreaching need to protect the female category.
Absolutely.
And when they throw that category in there, it jumps back to you, could there be a transgender category? And I know lumping it all into one big group, do you have a transgender female category, a transgender male category? Are there enough to compete on that level? Enough entries to compete on that level?
Have we seen, and I'm sure it has happened, but have we seen a lot of issue with females that were transgender or transitioning that wanted to go play the male sport that became an issue. They haven't been headline stories if they are.
Yeah. I hadn't done the research on it. I would guess not. Just because, yeah, exactly. If males transitioning to a transgendered, being a transgendered female, I guess you could just say, because not all of them are necessarily transitioning or anything, but a transgendered female going into female sports, if they don't succeed, I don't know that it's a big story, one way or the other. I don't know. I'm not saying that they're not doing it because they wouldn't be able to compete. That's lumping a sum of transgendered females moving for that reason, saying, I'm not a man, I'm a woman, because they want to compete at that level.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might be a little far-fetched. I don't know. I think if they're using that to, just like we saw this in the swimmer, using that to compete at that level, because obviously they moved up the ranks a lot higher in the female category than in the male category.
Yeah,
I think that does a disservice to all transgendered people. And I support anybody wanting to do what they want to do. That's your position. If you're not bothering anybody, that's what you should be able to do. It's your right. Now, this is where you start infringing on other people's rights.
Mm-hmm.
Whether intentional or not. I know people on some sides, political or not, want to say that's all they're doing. That's all, the swimmer was doing. It may be true, maybe not. I don't know. I can't prove what their intentions were or not. And that's fine. I understand as a transgendered person, you feel excluded in general. I can't imagine what sort of things you go through. But
outside of sports,
but at a certain point, yes, you're getting told no again. Mm-hmm. In this aspect, if you're a transgendered woman trying, that was born a male, I guess, born a male. I don't even know if that's even the politically correct way to say it now. I don't know. We're not trying to be political whatsoever on this show. This is a sports show. But moving to female sports from male sports, like we said, it's just not fair. And mm-hmm. that's...
Well, I think locally, man, and it's probably been more years than I want to say. I'm thinking just a couple years ago. It's probably been 10 years that locally there was a male transgender that was, I think, in female wrestling. I think it was.
Yeah. No, you're right.
And ended up winning state, if I'm not, if I'm right, because there was no rulings one way or another, and they allowed it. And there was a really big stir up from all the female athletes that were competing that this is a male that came into our sport.
That's a very physical sport. And I mean, again, if give me a month to train and I'll go train and I'll go compete against a female wrestler, college professional, whatever the ranks, I'm getting my butt kicked. But if you have a male and a female that are both at the same level, experience-wise, mm-hmm. that have been training, if the male is significantly stronger, which in general males are, it's going to be difficult for that female to win. Now, on the level, just to be inclusive and not follow fake news, the swimmer did not win any championships. They finished 3rd and 4th in the female ranks, but in the male ranks, they weren't even significant. Yeah. Definitely did move up. But yes, in the wrestling one, they at least made it to finals. I think they had won a state championship. It was in the high school level.
We use basketball as an example. There's a requirement for so much athleticism at the basketball game that males would typically have an advantage there.
Height-wise as well. You just look, in general, at WNBA, there are 7-foot-tall WNBA players.
Sure.
But overall, if you look at the average players...
But are they built like a LeBron James? Are they built...
Nobody's built like LeBron James.
I thought, the physicality of the game, they just wouldn't have that.
No.
There's not one that would. And, a game, say football. Now, of course, women, there are some semi-pro women's football leagues, but in general, outside of a kicker, possibly... You haven't really seen any females that have tried to go play. I mean, we've seen some college
mm-hmm.
kickers that have gone. I don't know if we've seen, and maybe I'm sure there is at some level, seen a female go and play a position in football. I mean, the physicality, could you ever see a situation where a female would be able to stand in and play linebacker at the NFL level, or a slot receiver and come run a crossing route across the middle?
When I was in high school, we did have it was on the freshman team. A girl did play receiver. She was kicker and receiver. I don't know that I'm not saying one could not make it. But I'm saying in the world, not that we live in today, that just in general in the world, the way things are, even as forward thinking as people are today, if a female linebacker made it to NCAA, made it to college football at whatever level, division, whatever, they'd have a target on their back. Nobody wants to be shown up.
Unfortunately, that
and
would
I think that's where head to head may be better than a lot of other players. But you pick one player that's not a LeBron James or that's not dominating and single them out, which in most instances, if they're an above average player, they're not going to be singled out like that. And you say, don't let that player, we all know how athletics is, or how coaches are. In the moment, you have to get pumped up for a game, get the aggression going. We know locker room talk. Whether you agree with it or not, whatever. What would be said about a female athlete on the other side. Hopefully nothing too ridiculous or offensive, but they say, don't let that person beat you.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't think that it would happen. One day, maybe it would happen.
I mean, and maybe not even having a transgender category, maybe the more we talk, a co-ed category, where maybe you have high-level females that want to go compete against a male, and you have low-level males that want to go and compete, and maybe you have a co-ed mixed category that could compete, and it would be completely separate from the male or female side.
And I'm sure there are females that can compete at that level in most sports.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, I'm not claiming that men are more dominant. I'd get my butt kicked.
No, I'm a dad of 2 daughters, and I absolutely think that they can rule the world, that they can go compete against anyone. But there's also a realization that you have to see is, do I want my daughter being dominated by a male in a male sport? Like, why would I subject her to that? Or even in a female sport where she has an opportunity to be successful, why would I want a male athlete to come in and be able to dethrone her from that?
And in general, females wouldn't necessarily try to compete in male sports. Maybe football, because there's not a football league for women. It doesn't do...
I mean, I could see a Brittany Griner. She could probably be somewhat successful in the NBA. Now, she doesn't have the frame size to compete with these male athletes,
you can be aggressive as you want, but your body only lasts, it keeps up with so much.
Now, do I think she could be successful? Sure, I think she could be successful.
I think it's doing women's rights a disservice to say that there are women who probably could compete on the same level as men, but they're not going to try. Well, like I said, you're doing a disservice to women's rights to say, okay, the women's category isn't near as important. They should go try to compete in the men's category. We all know the statistics in NBA, WNBA, the ratings, that LeBron James makes more than the entirety of the NBA, WNBA salaries. Say what you want. The ratings are what they are.
Yeah.
But in general, I know the comments are going to say, well, you don't see women just in general trying to compete with them. They can't. I'm not. For the most part, we don't think most women can, but I think there are some that can. But there's no reason, unless they're just looking for a paycheck, to leave the WNBA. If we saw some sort of LeBron type athlete, not necessarily just in size, but that she just dominates the WNBA, that she should try to move to the NBA. No, she should stay at the WNBA and try to grow whatever she wants to do. That's fine. I'm not saying she's not welcome in the NBA, but in general, that's why you don't see that, because you want to try to grow women's sports instead of saying, well, let's just concede to the men because their sports are more popular, and forget this. But yeah, I think you're right. You take a WNBA All-Star, put him in the NBA. It's not like they just can't play anymore.
No.
There's a lot of smaller players in the NBA. I mean, Muggsy Bogues,
Yeah, I mean,
dominated.
JJ Barea was very successful in the league as well.
Yeah, I mean, you take 6'3"
Steph Curry.
6'3" looks really small.
Yeah.
NBA. JJ Barea was right there. He's taller than I am, and I think I'm taller than the average guy. But you look on NBA court, you think he's like 5'8", 5'6", something like that. I don't know the average height of professional women in the WNBA, but there are a lot of tall women.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, in comparison, look like it.
What about, let's recap the NFL free agency. We haven't talked about that in about a week or so. Obviously Derek Carr officially signed with New Orleans. Jimmy Garoppolo to Las Vegas. I don't know if we ever discussed that. I thought that's where he may go.
Yeah, we had mentioned some of that. I think one of the winners, if you want to, more just an off-season, not necessarily free agency, because they haven't made a lot of big moves in free agency, but the Dallas Cowboys made good moves who some are arguing might have had the best offseason. Maybe not the biggest improvement, because you throw a quarterback, Derek Carr to needs, Derek Carr to the Saints.
Oh, that's huge.
That's huge for the Saints. But you look at the entirety of the Dallas Cowboys draft strategy now has changed for the better, because they filled a hole to arguably two of their biggest needs: receiver, or number 2 receiver in general. Michael Gallup's a great player. I think he thrived as a number 3 receiver when he was healthy. You bump him up to number 2. Now he was coming off an injury, and now he's coming off an ACL injury again. You were worried as a 2 receiver, what's going to happen? You're not worried about CeeDee Lamb anymore. They go out, trade for Brandon Cooks. A little bit probably past his prime. I think he's still right there in his prime, but towards the end. But you're not asking him to be Amari Cooper or the number 1 receiver, CeeDee Lamb. Say be the number 2 receiver, which he had success in Houston with no quarterback. So you put him with Dak. Now we can see what happens. And then Stephon Gilmore, again, Cowboys, it was linked to the Cowboys a few years ago. And again, there are a lot of free agents linked to the Cowboys.
And they had a defensive back need. They were looking at a corner. There were rumors of Jalen maybe making a move for Jalen Ramsey. That didn't happen, but as soon as Jalen Ramsey went to Miami, they made a quick move for Stephon Gilmore, which to
would
me
have been better a few years ago.
Probably gives you arguably the best cornerback duo in the NFL.
Stephon Gilmore, again, they tried to, I don't know if they tried very hard, but they were rumored to get him a few years ago. Of course, it would have taken a lot more compensation to get him, but he's definitely an upgrade. You saw last year with injuries how depleted their cornerback position could get. So they fill cornerback, receiver. I know Bobby Wagner is still rumored. I think that would solidify that. You re-sign Leighton Vander Esch, who I think you saw last year when he missed a couple of games how big he was. He didn't dominate as he did the first couple of years, but he was an anchor there.
Yeah, he's a solid linebacker for the Cowboys. I think they still lack with the way they use Micah Parsons in the rush game, the pass rushing, that you don't see, and especially this past season, you didn't see him in the linebacker spot as often as you did the first season. So I think they do have a hole there. They have a need for a legitimate lockdown linebacker. But what about, we have Alan Lazard to the Jets. I'm sorry. Has Aaron Rodgers made any decisions? Has there been any moves there? It's kind of gone final.
It can go either way, but at this point, just because it's Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers says he wants to go there. There's no incentive for the Packers to move him sooner, salary-wise or not. If they wait, they can wait till June and get kicked back there. The Jets, be in more of a hurry just for signing players, but I think we can at this point we can awfully expect him to be on the Jets. He wants to go there. It's been said he's either going to retire or go to New York, but it's all up to the Packers to trade him.
And I think the Packers they've smart
moved
to
on.
make a move for him to at least get some compensation.
And that's where a lot of it is. I mean, how much of their salary is he going to take up? What are the Jets going to give to? A lot of that's negotiating, but there's no incentive for the Packers to move him sooner than later. They said they're going to move on from him. There's no reason to expect him not to play for the Jets next year.
No, another team that has made a lot of moves this offseason is the Carolina Panthers. Of course, they needed to make a lot of moves. They bring in Adam Thielen. They bring in Miles Sanders, Avon Bell.
They just signed
Hayden Hurst.
Aguilar. I think he not Nelson Aguilar. Is it Nelson Aguilar? No, I was just reading about Nelson Aguilar this morning. But they've made a lot of good moves, and
I mean, Adam Thielen was a good one for them. He's fallen off a little bit in Minnesota. He hasn't been as dominant of a receiver, but he's going to fill a hole that Carolina had that they needed to fill.
And it all depends who they sign a quarterback. I know there's rumors that I may go for Anthony Richardson, which for me wouldn't make sense. I mean, if that's your quarterback, that's your quarterback. If you feel good about a guy, you've scouted him, you feel confident, that's fine. But I don't know that you needed to trade up for the number one pick to get him. But then again, that's why I'm not a GM. I think if you have the number one pick, whoever ends up, whether they trade it away again or not, Bryce Young is your safe pick. He's 5'10". That's the only knock on him. It's a different game these days, but there's very little negatives.
From what I've seen in the conversations between him and Carolina, I think that's the move Carolina's planning on making. I think they're planning on drafting Bryce Young. I think he's a good fit. I mean, if he can have the impact that, with in the Bears situation with their quarterback that he had there, that I think he can transition. I think that. I mean, Russell Wilson's proven you don't have to be a huge guy to be successful in the NFL. Yeah. You just have to be able to play the position. And I think he can play the position.
It's all about what's between the ears. I know, Bryce Young is going to do the work. Mm-hmm. You see a lot of college quarterbacks. They have all the talent in the world. They have the size. They have everything, but they don't put in the work because they, honestly, at this point in most of their careers, they've been the guy. They're the best guy in high school. They're the best guy in college.
Yeah.
And sometimes, depending on your upbringing, just depending on what coaches you've had, it can get you can get a level of entitlement where you're like, well, I don't need to watch. I just have to do the minimum. And then you move to the NFL, and Jamarcus Russell comes to mind. You see players like that who just don't put in the work, and it doesn't hold up. Their talent can only get them so far. And not that there's knocks against any of the other players. I just think Bryce Young would be a solid choice where if it doesn't work out, there's no regrets.
Yeah.
If you trade up for the number one spot and take arguably the third or fourth best quarterback in this draft and it doesn't work out, there's going to be some criticism there.
Yeah.
This draft is packed with quarterbacks. I think there's a lot of value to go. I think the first 5 picks might all be quarterbacks. Carolina's taking a quarterback. Houston's taking a quarterback. I know we were talking about Jalen because he was talking about being the first. We were talking about him being the number one overall pick. Would he drop because of the, the issues with racing and then there was a wreck? Mm-hmm. I think he might drop out of the top 5, not necessarily because of that, just because I think it's so packed with quarterbacks and that's a franchise maker. I think Carolina,
and that's the moves that teams are making to get to the top. Is to get their quarterback.
And I think Carolina is one of those teams. They traded up to the number one pick. They're not a terrible team.
Yeah.
They
had a rough season because they haven't had. I mean, they haven't had a carousel of quarterbacks the past season.
Coaches, quarterbacks. I think with Frank Wright, you might have, who's a quarterback himself, you might be able to get some stability there. And I know there's a lot of teams that are in that purgatory where you're not going to win a championship, but you're not bad enough to be able to get you have to draft really well because you're not going to get those top picks. And I think Carolina's in that mode, before any offseason moves, probably a little bit below average of purgatory. But they made some good moves. They have a good team around them. They arguably the worst division in football right now. We'll see what Tampa can do. Obviously the Saints, we'll see what they can do. They have a new quarterback. I think they can make some noise this year. I think it's not outside the realm of possibility for them to make the playoffs.
Well, now for a team that doesn't make a lot of noise, the Atlanta Falcons. That was a big
signing in the NFC South.
And Jesse Bates, they pick him up. He leaves Cincinnati, the anchor for that defense at safety. He signs a $64 million contract with the Atlanta Falcons. A need that Atlanta had, but for Jesse Bates to leave that, I know that these things come down to money and dollars, but to leave that defense in Cincinnati, as successful as they've been, and he's, for the most part, been the guy in that secondary.
For a perennial Super Bowl contender, they play in the Super Bowl, they lose in the AFC Championship game. A player.
For me, I look at it as there's no doubt that you're back in the AFC Championship game again this season.
It's just a goal. This is what's your goal. Is your goal to win a championship because he was in the right spot to do that? Is it to make money? Because obviously Cincinnati's getting in that position where you're about to have to pay Joe Burrow. I would guess another, more than Aaron Rodgers, more than Mahomes. I think it's probably going to break records and reset the market again.
Yeah.
I don't understand the move for the Falcons. It's a need, sure, but the thing about free agency is you overpay for every free agency unless you're taking a risk with injury or something, or an older player.
Yeah.
Atlanta's not in the position to overpay for players right now. You build your team through the draft, maybe get some value free agents picks. You don't even have your quarterback. You're supposed to get your quarterback. This is how most GMs do it. Draft your quarterback. You have him for 4, maybe 5 years, depending on how great he does on his rookie quarterback contract.
Yeah.
And before you even you draft your quarterback, which I assume that's their idea. You're not going to start Marcus Mariota unless you just have a lot of confidence in Ryder.
Right?
Oh yeah, that's right. I meant Cincinnati quarterback
Desmond Ryder.
Ryder. Unless you have confidence. Maybe they're rolling with him, but for what I've seen, I don't think he's going to be the guy.
Yeah.
Especially, you have to make a move this year because of the quarterback market. I know next year you have Caleb Williams probably coming out. You're going to have some good quarterbacks next year. But honestly, the position you're in, you have to draft a quarterback. That's what this business comes down to with the short-lived, we're not in the time where Terry Bradshaw can play terrible for 2 or 3 years. And then
you have
develop.
You have
to come in and show that you can play. If you're not going to play, they're going to trade you, they're going to bench you, they're going to cut you. Same works with GMs. You have 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And if you're not, it's either put up or shut up. And unless you have a deal worked out with the owner saying, hey, I'm going to give you time, you build a team, you have to go after that quarterback.
Yeah, they didn't the Falcons picked up Taylor Heineke. Maybe that's are they thinking that's
a value thing where, hey, we have our backup quarterback now, so the Cowboys re-signed Cooper Rush.
Yeah.
They don't do that to say, hey, if Dak doesn't work out in any sense.
No.
Heineke's been in the league long enough where it's like, hey, he could play.
But in that instance, you have Dak. You know who your quarterback is. The Falcons don't know who their quarterback is.
To avoid beating a drive, if we're talking about, hey, this is my put up or shut up year, I'm a GM, I'm going to get fired, or I'm a coach, I'm going to get fired after this year. I don't have a good draft pick to draft a quarterback. Honestly, I shouldn't say this. I'm going to get hate for this. I would pick Carson Wentz before Heineke, even though Heineke just beat out Wentz in Washington. For me, it's all in the head for Wentz. He still appears to have talent, to have arm strength that Heineke can get you through some games. He had a little good stretch last year. But over the course of a season,
and maybe the Falcons' plan is to bring in a few guys and let them compete through training camp and see
that's
who
not
wins
bad.
who wins the job.
That's not a bad idea. If you can bring in Heineke to say, hey, he's our backup quarterback. Great, you have a backup quarterback. You have
He's
a guy.
had success in the NFL. Could he help us win a few games?
And if you're going to bring it, maybe helps him with Ritter. Maybe another rookie quarterback coming in. He has experience. He's not, Peyton Manning. He doesn't have the wisdom of Tom Brady, but he understands what it takes to come in as a backup.
I mean, while we're talking about the NFC South, I mean, the Saints have to be the most dominant team in the NFC South now.
Not saying much for sure.
But, the Buccaneers, now without Tom Brady, they pick up Baker Mayfield at quarterback. I think they're worse than they were with Tom Brady.
Clearly, but
I don't think they're a playoff team.
Was Tom Brady the issue with the Buccaneers?
No, I don't think Brady was, but I think with Brady, he made them a playoff team. I don't think Baker Mayfield makes them a playoff team.
Well, from his first 2 years to his last, yes, Tom Brady was the difference in that team.
Yeah.
That probably, assuming because of age, he comes down.
But I think more so for that team than his physicality of being able to play the game was his mental side of the game, his leadership.
Yeah.
That was a team that needed a leader.
And then his body couldn't keep up, and without a quarterback, it's hard to believe that a 44-year-old quarterback was
going to lead.
But like you said, with his experience, with his leadership, he was able to make it look like it
their
wasn't
way into
him.
the playoffs.
Yeah,
and
won a Super Bowl a couple of years before.
I don't think that Baker Mayfield makes that difference. By far, I think the Saints are going to be tremendously better this year. Yeah. I think they're going to be one of the top teams. Obviously, they're going to win their division. They're going to be one of the top teams in the NFC.
Baker Mayfield, I know they had different paths. He didn't have flashes. Is weirdest to believe as great as Carson Wentz, because Carson Wentz was a MVP candidate until he got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And for a few years there was pretty good. Baker Mayfield didn't really have it. He had a couple years where he was there where I think his play was overrated a little bit because he played for the Browns and hey, Browns finally have a quarterback.
Yeah.
But he's 1 year behind Wentz. Honestly, he's going to jump from team to team.
Yeah.
Had some odd success for a couple of games for the Rams. But at this point, he's the starter in Tampa. Let's see what they do in the draft. They have a lot of needs where I wouldn't draft a quarterback just yet. They're not in the position to really draft.
Yeah.
There's going to be a competent quarterback there for them. I don't know what they have, 19th, 20th pick, something like that. I think you automatically have it best the 19th pick if you make the playoffs. So I assume the worst record, but they're somewhere in that realm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how far some of these quarterbacks drop, but I think they'll have a position. They'll be in the position to draft a quarterback, but like we said, it's not just the quarterback, it's the whole team. And I'm a big fan of building your team around you that you can, and then getting a quarterback. Getting your quarterback and milking his rookie contract as long as you can. There's not a lot of, is there a free agent quarterback better than Baker Mayfield right now? If you listen to Cam Newton, maybe. Cam Newton says there's not 32 better quarterbacks than him.
And I would agree with that as well. But
the wear and tear on his body, I mean, you're not bringing Cam Newton in to have a resurgence of his career. It's more for the reason you bring Carson Wentz in. It's more for the reason you bring Baker Mayfield in. Depending on your situation, in the Buccaneers situation, let's just stay relevant, see if we can strike lightning in a bottle. We do have some talented players, a decent defense. Where this isn't a rebuilding year, it's a retooling year. Maybe grab some lightning in a bottle from Baker Mayfield and see what happens. If not, nobody's going to blame you one way or the other. We will
continue to follow free agency. The draft coming up starting April 27th. So let's see what kind of moves are made prior to that and how some of these guys' draft stock fluctuates and what other draft moves we see. Because as wacky as this spring has been in all sports, I can't imagine that we're not going to see some crazy moves.
I mean, with so many quarterbacks left, so many teams needing quarterbacks, I think the draft is just going to be. I think there's going to be a lot of movements. There's still a lot of movement to come in the top 5 picks. A lot of trades.
Yeah. Now for the thread. This week, go ahead and pull this up, man. These have to be. These may be all time the best uniforms that we've seen, and we'll talk about on the thread. Go ahead and key those up. Look at these. I mean, is that not the cleanest? This brings back childhood memories for me.
Yeah.
As kids, these are the uniforms we grew up. I even think our brother Patrick played when we were in Little League. You know, you
were their
played for these teams, and these were the uniforms they had: the teal hats, the white pinstripes, the Marlins. Now, pull the one up. You have the vintage, the old picture there, or do you just have the new ones? That's okay. The only difference is they don't have the numbers on the front.
Yeah.
And the old they had the number.
You should imagine them winning the World Series in these.
Yeah. Yeah, they had the number on the front there in black, but these uniforms, so by far the best we've talked about. I mean, what do you think about throwbacks and
Yeah, you have to. They have to be far enough removed from those uniforms, which the Marlins definitely they've rebranded to the Miami Marlins. I
mean,
into that Vice City type coloring. I'm not.
This is the 20-year anniversary for the 1993. What was the World Series year, right?
No, that's the year they came.
This was their
inaugural year.
Their inaugural
they won
year.
in '97.
Yeah,
I believe. Miami's doing with their, I know the Heat have like their Vice City pink and neon green, and the Miami Marlins uniform, which really sounds weird to me calling them the Miami Marlins. I don't like their uniforms at all. Their new uniforms. But I think you have to be far enough removed where there's not a lot of uniforms that I grew up with that now I can see as throwbacks. I know, like in the NBA, I was watching a game and the Utah Jazz had their purple with the Rocky Mountains on their jersey, and they were calling that throwback. And to me, thinking, well, that's just their uniforms. I know different colors they've rebranded a little bit too, but that just makes me feel old to see, like, I don't think of that. And they may be just as far as removed as the Marlins are from these uniforms, but these do truly look like throwbacks to me. I don't know if it's because moving to a new uniform that I find hideous in comparison, which going back to the Utah Jazz, their uniforms now I find boring, not necessarily hideous
comparative to their
because I like the purple with the whatever
teal
blue. I don't know exactly, cyan blue, something like that with the mountains are just so bold, and now they're just like the same with the Phoenix Suns. The way we're not going to get into all the different uniforms, but these I do like these throwback uniforms. There's a couple of more that I'm not going to mention because I know you have coming up on future episodes of the thread. But these are clean, simple uniforms comparatively. So maybe that's the difference when you go from these bold uniforms to boring. The bold ones are still better, I feel, or when they are better, they don't feel like throwbacks. They just feel like you've had ugly uniforms. Yeah. And now when you go from simple, classic, if you want to call this classic, and it'd be 30-year anniversary.
30, and I misspoke. I was
about to say
20 years since they've worn them. They retired these uniforms in 2003.
It's their 30th anniversary.
This is the 30th anniversary of the team. It's actually, I believe, the 25th anniversary of the World Series win. Yes. And this would be the 20... I
wasn't meaning to correct you.
No, it's 20 years since they've won.
I was about to say 20 years. They're 20 years old, even though they're classic. And I'm thinking, that's not right. But 30 years old makes us feel old. We think 20 years is a long time ago. But yeah, I guess you can call them classic now. The 20 years ago since they've worn them. They have them very simple pinstripes. And a lot of teams can't get away with wearing pinstripes. Only if you can. And I think these are uniforms, maybe because they're throwback, that they look good pinstripes. A lot of teams have tried to emulate Yankee pinstripes, and it just doesn't work.
And I think it's hard, but outside of the Yankees, Mets, Twins,
Cubs,
and to me, Marlins, I think those are, maybe Padres, they've worn pinstripe. I think it has to be a team that's always worn a pinstripe uniform.
Yeah.
And to me, a pinstripe uniform just never gets old.
Yeah.
That's the one uniform that just never gets old. And this is just such a classic look. But even saying this is a classic, it doesn't look like an old classic look.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. It looks like it would fit in today's. If they switch back to this colorway and this styling, this would fit just fine in today's MLB.
And I have to, again, let me mention this because I don't think I mentioned it before, because some people are listening on a recorded podcast version. We do have pictures up here showing these uniforms if you want to go check us out on YouTube to see them. But
you can also follow us on Instagram. It's
at Peak One Sports. So we're talking about the pinstripes working. I think a lot of teams try to go to this extravagant look, these modern uniforms, and then you put pinstripes and it just doesn't work, because you just have to have these clean, classy, I think the number would be better, but you just have it just pinstripes and the Marlins logo, nothing crazy. There's only two colors really outside of white. There's the teal, whatever kind of green you would call this, teal and black, and now they have pink and yellow and whatever.
Which is very Miami colors, but this is just still such an iconic look.
And sometimes that works when you go for, a side note, when you go for a team name or colors that fit the city, fit the area, that works sometimes.
Well, and we know why they switched. That this team was in a lull. They needed something to revamp the brand. They had a new ballpark. They were just trying to go big and bold.
A new owner with Jeter, it just hasn't gone the way they thought it would. Ironically, they go to new uniforms without pinstripes when they get the captain, Jeter, Mr. Yankee, as their owner, or one of their owners. But no, I like this move. I don't think it's here. I want to say I read that it's on Friday games, maybe home games.
And I think it's is it in July only?
Oh, is it in July only? I thought it was all year.
No, I think that they were going to, I think they were, in June only. And they were going to sport these in June.
See, I have no problem with them going. I think they should just do it all year, or Friday nights, or whatever games all year. The Texas Rangers wear their powder blues on Sundays, Sunday home games, which is a cool deal. Which is, I guess, kind of throwback. Those aren't necessarily the throwback uniforms, but I know the all powder blue is a throwback concept. These in general, I think, are going to hit. Just because they're not going back to these uniforms, I think you have to limit when you're going throwback, because at some point they come back. I know the NFL is going across the board with teams wearing throwbacks once or maybe twice sometimes.
Yeah.
I only see the white jerseys here. Is it just going to be home games? Are they throwing back?
They'll just wear these. The MLB limits teams to the amount of uniforms they can use.
That's stupid. I understand the NFL. It doesn't make sense to me when you talk about the helmet. You can only have so many helmets. I know they've lifted that for concussion purposes. I don't understand that. Some breaking in helmets. I'm not sure what the deal is with that, because I know a lot of teams will just decal their helmets.
Yeah.
But in baseball, that doesn't. I get you have to limit to an extent, because again, the NBA is kind of ridiculous with a lot of their uniforms. When you wear, the city edition so much, it gets kind of, I like just wear your classics and then occasionally throw out there. But I think
we just like these uniforms so much. You want to see them wear them all the time, and obviously
and it would get
old
old
many times.
It would get old, because like we said, they work on Friday nights. If you have Apple TV, you have like Friday Night Baseball.
Yeah,
I know the Marlins will be featured in that, and I might watch it just because of the uniforms.
Yeah. I can say that this hat, if you go to a Lids, this is going to be a popular hat.
Yeah.
And all the kids don't even know why they're getting it. They've, this has just not been a look you've been able to find in a long time. So
it works better because the M for, I guess, Miami now, I could stand for Marlin, but the M doesn't transition as well as the F as a Marlin does.
Yeah. Because
just the body of the Marlin going into the F. Looks a lot, I guess, this way. If you're watching on YouTube, it'd be the other way. Looks better. I think it's kind of forced when you're trying to do with the M.
Mm-hmm.
But these are very clean looks, and I'm, like I said, I'm one where just keep it simple. Leave bold uniforms for your alternates.
Yeah.
Just like I mentioned, the Miami Heat, that's their alternate uniforms with the pink and green, the Vice City look. And then Miami took a bold look, but like you said, they were in a lull. I would say they're still in a lull.
Yeah.
Florida's weird about their sports teams and, for whatever reason. But I think these are great uniforms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys, I want to thank you as always for tuning in to the Leadoff. Heard here every Saturday morning. I know today we got started a little bit earlier, so hopefully you can check the recording if you missed us. But be sure to check us out. Follow us at Morning Leadoff at Peak One Sports. And until next time, guys, thank you for watching.
Have a great Saturday.